Hi there, I'm Peter Millard and this is 10 Minute Workshop, where 10 minutes in the workshop is never enough, it's never 10 minutes, and it's never 10 minutes wasted. In the workshop this week, well, I'm continuing 1001 gift ideas from a sheet of birch plywood with, we're going to be making a mantle clock, and that's coming up next. Tick-tock. So we're making a little mantle clock, one that goes on a shelf, not a wall clock. And it's going to be made out of 1/2-inch birch ply, 12 mil sheet of birch ply. You don't need much of it. I bought a little clock mechanism from Amazon or eBay, can't remember which. These are incredibly cheap. If you buy enough of them, you can get them down to sort of pennies. I paid sort of £3 or £4 for that one because I wanted to specify the type of hands that it has. The clock itself is going to be about, these measurements aren't exact. Mine is about 160 mil square. Obviously you can make yours whatever size you want. And all I've done here is I've drawn up 160 mil square shape on a bit of scrap MDF. I've marked the centre of it so I can approximately get the clock mechanism in the centre. And I've just worked out roughly how deep a strip of 12 mil 1/2-inch board I need, and for this clock mechanism at this particular size it's about 28 millimeters, about 28 mil, inch and an eighth, something like that. So with 28 mil as our size, I've ripped 4 lengths of 12 mil birch ply. This will be more than enough to do a single clock. Once we've got our 28 mil strips ripped, then we can work out the length. And what we're doing with this, we stagger these. So instead of doing 2 long ones and 2 short ones, we stagger them so that they're all the same length. And all I've done is I've taken that measurement and put a little pencil mark there, and I've cut 16 lengths of 12 mil birch ply to that size. So with our 4 strips of 12 mil birch ply reduced down to 16 shorter strips, what we're going to do with these, we're actually going to glue them together but stagger them. I'm applying 10-minute PVA to the ends of the ply and pulling them tightly together with tape, working my way around to form each frame, then laying all 4 frames on a flat surface and weighting them down while they dry. So I paid a little bit extra to get this clock mechanism with the hands I wanted, but also because it has a long stem, it has a 14 mil supposedly stem in the centre, so it'd come through a piece of 12 mil birch ply no problem for the clock face. But in fact it's not. That's supposed to be 14 mil and it won't even cover a sheet of 12 mil, so I'm going to have to use 6 mil for the face. And while those little frames are gluing up, having their initial glue up anyway, I'll cut the piece of 6 mil for the face now. Okay, so 10 or 15 minutes have gone by. Obviously the adhesive has only just sort of started to grab really. It's solid enough for light handling, but it's only glued on edge to edge, so it's not a great joint. We're treating them very gently, but we can take the clamping tape off. And what we're going to do, we're going to use these to build up the frame of the clock. So when we build these up, we put them so that the ends overlap. Again, that's a long piece and a short piece. So we put the long piece up and the short one across. And we'll build those up and then glue and clamp the face on. It's quick work to glue the frames together, lining them up so the joins are offset. So while the body of the clock and the clock face are all sort of clamped up and gluing there, what I want to do for the markings is just drill into the clock face slightly bigger for the 12693 markings and then slightly smaller for the 510, 2025 past sort of markings, and put a dark dowel into the face just to put the hour markers in there. Now, I don't have any dark dowel. My timber yard doesn't have any. You can buy it online. There are specialist timber stores that do sort of, you know, hobby pack bundles that are all about sort of 350, 400 mil long or whatever. I'll put a link in the description below. But what I do have is a Tim Sway square, of course, which has dowel cutters in it. So what I'm going to do is I've ripped some little thin sticks of the Meranti on my little bandsaw, and I've planed them up approximately, and I'm going to have a go at making my own dowels. Look at that, that's absolutely brilliant. This is the most fun I've had with the drill and a stick of wood for a long time. I've never made dowels before. That was so easy. Of course, this is the Imperial Tim Sway square, so I've got 1/4 inch and 3/8, whatever that is. I think I've got a 9.5 mil drill bit. I'll make it work with a 6 mil and a 9.5 mil. But that's fantastic. I had no idea that would work so well. Okay, so glue set. Get this unclamped. And what we'll do, we'll run this over to the miter saw and clean up those edges. I start by cleaning up the edges with 90-degree cuts, then roll the saw over by 3 degrees and make the final cut on the base so the clock body leans back slightly. I'm covering the clock face in masking tape to minimise the sanding later, then connecting the diagonals to mark the centre and extending those marks to the 12, 9, 6 and 3 positions. Using a scrap of plies or gauge, I mark the centre of my drilling points, then draw the clock face with a pair of compasses, and use a pair of dividers to position the hour marks, picking these out with an awl before removing the tape. Now again, at the risk of stating the obvious, if you've got a drill press, by all means use it. I've just reset my drill press to do cabinet hinges, so I'm going to be drilling these freehand. I'm going to start with the 3/8 with a 9.5 mil bit. I'm using a lip and spur or brad point drill bit to drill the hour marks. First the 9.5 mil. I've actually been using this drill bit in my balloon draw jig. So still got the stop on it. We won't worry about taking that off for this. And then the 6 mil. And I'm cleaning up the edges of the holes with a scalpel just to keep things as tidy as possible. I'm putting a slight bevel on the end of the dowel before applying a dab of glue, then hammering it home. Now when it comes to cutting dowels flush like this, you can get some very clever little saws that are flush cut saws. They're designed so the teeth are only set on one edge, so you can get right down close and not mark the actual surface of what you're cutting. I don't actually have one of those, so I'm just using a little X-Acto saw blade in a handle, because that's the finest tooth blade I have, and I'm just going to cut this as close as I can without marking the surface. With a smaller dowel I'm using a pencil sharpener to bevel the ends, then fitting them in the same way, and not forgetting to drill out an 8 mil hole for the clock centre. With a glue set I'm carefully sanding back the dowels flush with the clock face, finishing off with a small random orbital sander on both the face and the clock body. Okay, well that's been given a thorough sanding, finishing off with P320. So now we're just going to give it some oil. And that should make those, make that little end grain dowels really stand out.
I'm working the oil well into the end grain of the clock markings and all around the edges of the plywood body to really make the best of those layers.
So after a couple of coats of oil, the clock face is all looking up pretty nice. It's all very smooth and silky. I haven't shown it, but I rubbed this down with 320 grit between coats of oil just to sort of denib a little bit. And it's looking really nice. So the only thing that's left really is to fit the mechanism. Now again, it's the I think I mentioned earlier on, the clock mechanism is a little bit, the stem wasn't quite long enough to fit through a 12mm, so we fit a 6. And what I've done here is I've put little bumpers, door bumpers, onto the front face of the clock mechanism, so that when it comes through the front there, it doesn't come out too far. And we just settle that square. Oops. And there's the bits that come with it, with a little washer and a nut. You just need to fiddle those into place. Check it's reasonably square at the back. The bumpers do give it a little bit of grip as well, which is nice. And then we can set the hands on. And there we are. Clock's ticking. So that's it for this week's little clock project. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, give it a thumbs up, share it amongst your friends, and do consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Well, hey, just check back on a Friday when there's always something new up at noon. Look at the time. I gotta go. See ya.